The weirdest thing in Poppy playtime is not Huggy's teeth, not Catnap's smoke, not the prototype's body, and not even the giant experiments hiding in the dark. The weirdest thing is us. Because at this point, the real question is not just how we keep escaping. The real question is how we are still alive at all. Think about everything that has happened to the player across this story. We walk back into a dead factory after years. We survive Huggy Wuggy hunting us through collapsing catwalks. We make it through Mommy Longlegs and her games. We survive play care, catnap, gas, hallucinations, the prison, the doctor, the labs, Huggy's return, the tram crash, getting stabbed by the prototype, and then getting dropped into Poppy Gel. At some point, you stop saying this person is just lucky. At some point, you have to admit the game is trying to tell us something. And Chapter 5 is the chapter that finally makes that impossible to ignore, because it shows the player surviving in a way that feels much bigger than normal horror plot armor. At the start of the story, the easiest answer is the boring one. We are alive because we are careful, smart, and just fast enough. In Chapter 1, we survive because the factory is dangerous but still built like a place a worker could move through. We have the grab pack. We solve puzzles. We stay ahead of Huggy long enough for the floor to collapse under him. That is still within normal game logic. It is scary, but not yet impossible. The player looks like a normal person making it through one impossible day with just enough intelligence and just enough luck to keep moving. That kind of survival still feels believable inside the rules of a horror game. Then the story keeps going, and that simple answer starts breaking apart. By the time we reach the deeper parts of Playtime Co., survival is not just about ducking at the right time or solving a door puzzle. The factory is full of things that should have killed a normal person long ago. Not only the monsters, but the environment itself. Falls, collapses, gas, machines, broken rails, giant moving structures. Even the spaces feel built to grind bodies down. And still, the player keeps going. That starts to feel suspicious in the best way. Not suspicious like bad writing. Suspicious like the story is planting a bigger truth right in front of us and waiting for the right chapter to make it obvious. That is why Chapter 5 matters so much. It stops treating our survival like background information and turns it into part of the mystery. At the end of the chapter, the prototype survives the tram crash, catches the player, stabs them in the chest, and drops them into a vat of Poppy Gel before taking Poppy away. That is not a small injury. That is not some quick hit to the shoulder that a game just ignores. The framing of the scene makes it look fatal on purpose. Poppy reacts with panic. The player sinks. The voice sequence starts. It feels like the story is finally cashing in all the danger it has built for years and saying, this time, you really died. Then the chapter keeps going, and that changes everything. So how are we still alive after that? The cleanest answer the chapter gives us is the gel. Poppy Gel is not just colorful nightmare slime. The lore around it ties it to growth, regeneration, and body change. Chapter 5 makes that connection much harder to ignore because the player is submerged in it right after being gravely wounded, and then wakes up soon after, with Giblet helping bring them back from the brink. That means the game is not treating the gel like decoration. It is treating it like a force that can keep something alive that should have stopped. That is why so many people came out of the ending thinking the player either died and was revived, or was pushed so close to death that the gel and Giblet together dragged them back. Either way, Chapter 5 makes one thing very clear. The player does not survive that scene by being tough. The player survives because the same terrible science behind the factory is now touching them directly. And that is where the story gets much darker, because once you accept that answer, the question changes. It is no longer only how are we alive. Now it becomes what are we becoming by staying alive this way. That is the part I think Chapter 5 wants you to sit with. The player is not just escaping the experiments anymore. The player is starting to survive like the experiments survive. That does not mean the player has turned into a toy. The game has not confirmed anything that direct. But it does mean the line between human survival and Playtime Co survival is getting messy. The player keeps enduring things that feel outside normal limits, and the chapter chooses the one method of rescue that most strongly links them to the factory's body horror science. That is not an accident. That is the story telling you that the player is now tied to this place in a way that is deeper than just guilt, memory, or unfinished business. There is another part of the ending that pushes this even harder, and it is easy to miss because it flies past during the emotional shock of the scene. When the player sinks, there is that strange voice and vision sequence that echoes earlier nightmare language, especially the old welcome home, feeling tied to the story's deeper guilt and return. That matters because it makes survival feel almost chosen. Not chosen in some superhero way, chosen in a much more disturbing way. Like the factory, or the process, or the story itself still has a use for you. That is a terrifying idea, because it means being alive may not be freedom, it may be function. The player may still be alive because this world has not finished using them yet. And if that sounds too dark, look at the pattern of the whole series. Playtime Co. never wastes anything. The company did not waste children. It turned them into experiments. It did not waste broken toys. They became parts of larger horrors. It did not even waste Harley Sawyer after disaster followed him. He became a system mind. Everything in this factory gets recycled into purpose. So if the player keeps surviving in impossible ways, the scariest explanation is not luck. The scariest explanation is that the same world that recycles everyone else has found a reason to keep recycling us too. This is why I think the old answer people gave for years, the plot armor answer, is not enough anymore. Early on, sure, that worked. Horror game protagonist, strong will, good timing, convenient escapes, fine. But once Chapter 5 physically shows the player being stabbed, submerged, and still continuing after a revival tied to Poppy Gel and Giblet's intervention, the story is asking for a real explanation inside the lore. And the lore explanation is much more interesting than the writers just won't kill us. The lore explanation is that the player is now inside the same broken survival system that keeps the factory's nightmare alive. Now, let's go backward for a minute, because Chapter 5 hits hardest when you compare it to earlier chapters. Chapter 1 makes us think the player is just clever. Chapter 2 adds more stress and more endurance, but still nothing directly supernatural happens to the player's body. Chapter 3 starts pushing harder with dreams, gas, altered mental states, and the feeling that the factory knows you in a personal way. The line about coming back years later with your conscience catching up to you already frames the player as more than a random survivor. Then Chapter 4 pushes the player through the prison, the doctor, and more brutal areas without truly collapsing them. That means by the time Chapter 5 arrives, the player has already been shaped by repeated trauma inside the factory. The final stab and gel moment is not coming out of nowhere. It is the moment where all that vague something is off about how we keep making it finally takes physical form. And there is a really ugly twist hiding inside that. If the player is still alive because the gel can push life back into a dying body, then survival comes with a price. The factory's solutions are never clean. They always deform, they always bind, they always pull you deeper into the system. So the player surviving is not only good news, it means the player may now carry some piece of the factory's own logic inside them. Again, not confirmed as a full transformation. The story is not that blunt yet. But the more the player survives like this, the more the question changes from how are we alive to how much of us is still untouched by this place. That is a much stronger mystery than simple survival. Another thing that makes this all feel intentional is how other characters react. Poppy seems to believe the hit is fatal. The scene is sold as a true loss. Giblet's rescue matters because it feels like he is not just helping someone stand up after getting knocked down. He is pulling someone back from a line they should have crossed. That means the story wants the player's continued life to feel surprising inside the world, not only to the audience outside it. That difference matters. When a story treats survival as shocking to the characters too, it usually means survival itself is now a lore event. This also reframes the title question in a bigger way. Maybe how are we still alive in Poppy Playtime is not only about one wound or one fall. Maybe the real answer is that the player has been living on borrowed time from the very start. borrowed from luck at first, borrowed from skill in early chapters, borrowed from tools and timing for a while, and now borrowed from the same twisted science that made the factory what it is. That creates a haunting progression. The more we survive, the less normal that survival becomes. The longer we stay alive, the less alive starts to mean what it used to mean. And that brings us to what this means for Chapter 6, because that is where the real danger sits now. If the player is still alive through the gel and whatever else the factory has tied to them, then Chapter 6 may not only be about saving Poppy and stopping the prototype, it may also be about learning what survival has already done to us. That is a nasty possibility, but it fits the story too well to ignore. The player has become too central, too durable, and too tied to the deeper systems for the finale to act like none of that matters. If the prototype sees value in the player still being alive, or if Harley Sawyer understands something about why the player keeps enduring these things, then the next chapter could turn our survival into one of the biggest reveals in the whole series. And there is one more angle that makes this feel even stranger. The factory has always acted like the player returning means something. The guilt, the dream language, the feeling of being drawn back, the welcome home kind of voice, none of that feels random anymore after Chapter 5. If the player truly should have died and did not, then the story may be saying that coming back to the factory was never only a human choice. The factory is almost answering back. It keeps taking the player in and pushing the player through. So being alive may not be victory at all. It may be how the factory keeps the story moving until every hidden thing is brought into the open. That is why I think the best answer is also the creepiest one. We are still alive in Poppy Playtime because survival stopped being normal a long time ago. At first, we lived because we were careful. Then we lived because we were lucky. Then we lived because we were stubborn. By Chapter 5, we are still here because the factory's own unnatural power is now mixed into the way we keep going. The Poppy gel, the revival, the impossible endurance, the nightmare language around being needed and coming back, all of it points the same way. The player is no longer just a person dodging death. The player is becoming part of the same terrible system they came here to expose. So, if you want the real answer, it is not comforting. We are still alive because this place is not done with us. Watch the next video.